Hey Astro fam, Kitana here, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my Astro community. And in today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys about your past lives. Now, in astrology, we can directly see what your past lives were in your birth chart, and specifically, we can do this by looking at your South Node. And today's video specifically is based on your South Node sign. It's not based on your sun sign, moon sign, houses, none of that. It is based on your South Node sign. And if you don't know how to calculate your South Node sign, I'll put a picture on the screen or a video or something so you guys can see how you can figure it out. But basically, most of you guys probably already know your North Node sign. So if you know your North Node sign, it's just the opposite of that. So if you're like a Leo North Node, your South Node is automatically Aquarius. If you're like an Aries North Node, for example, your South Node is automatically Libra. So basically it's just like sister signs, which I explained in my couple videos ago. But anyway, but basically this video is based on your South Node sign. Okay, so let's talk about the past lives of Aries South Node people. So if you have an Aries South Node, basically in your past life, you were a warrior. And obviously this can manifest many ways, but essentially you were somebody who was a soldier, somebody who was a fighter, somebody who was in an army potentially, or you were some sort of conqueror, or somebody who was always fighting. And essentially with the Aries South Node, this suggests you had a very violent past life. This means you probably were very much alone a lot, because if we think about a soldier, like the Aries soldier archetype, you were somebody who was always on the battlefield. You were always, fighting. You were in solitude, like I said. You might have been very aggressive. And because you had such a violent past life, you might have died very young. Now, this is a very unique South Node because it does indicate a young death. It doesn't usually indicate that you died at old age. It indicates you died before the age of 25 or 30. So essentially with the Aries South Node, your past life was something where you were always fighting maybe, or you were either you were always alone or always fighting. Usually the life of a soldier is not really consistent or stable, or it's not very family oriented. It's not partner oriented. It's just very much about themselves. It's all about survival. That was one of the major themes of your past lives, is survival. And you were always very much in this energy of being ready to fight, being ready to be, what's the word called? It's being on the offensive or being on the defensive. You're always just ready to go. You have this very fighter mentality in your past life. So basically how that impacts your present life is that this manifests as somebody, if you have an Aries South Node, you are somebody who could be very selfish. And your selfishness you're not very aware of it. You're somebody who is very self-sufficient, very independent. You're very skilled at being independent. You're the type of person who's I don't need help. I don't need you. I'll do it myself. But this kind of mentality is very toxic for you in this lifetime. And it's not necessarily something you need to be embodying, because you already know how to be the soldier. You know how to be independent. You know how to fight for yourself. So you don't need to be that in this lifetime. And this means you have a Libra North Node. So if you guys want more insight about what your destiny is in this lifetime, watch my Libra North Node video. But basically another major theme that you struggle with in this life because of your past life is unifying with others. You're somebody who deeply struggles with relationships. You struggle with awareness of others. You have really great self-awareness, but that's pretty much it. It's you live in your own bubble. You don't see people around you. And this lack of awareness of other people makes people really not like you. And I feel with Aries South Node, you often want to connect with people. You often want to be in partnerships and have things work out, right? I think we all do, but with you specifically, you really want it, but you genuinely don't know how. You genuinely don't know how to have a functioning relationship. And the reason you don't know how is because in your past life, you were always alone. You were always by yourself. You knew how to do everything yourself. You didn't need anyone. So in this lifetime, it's your destiny and your purpose to learn how to be in a partnership, to learn how to be harmonious, work with people, be balanced. You don't have to fight anymore. You're not on the war field anymore. That's the key thing you guys should take away from this, is that you don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to be on this survival mode. You don't have to feel everyone is against you. That's another thing with your life theme. It's you feel people are against you, or it's me versus them, or you think of this very much fighter dynamic. But you need to think more in the Libra mindset of peace, harmony, balance, we versus I, us versus them. You don't have to think Like, you should think more of in terms of partnerships and us and we instead of just I and me. And overall, it is your purpose and destiny to unify with others and gain awareness of other people and genuinely be invested in other people instead of just yourself. Okay, so let's talk about the past lives of Taurus South Node. So with Taurus South Node, this automatically makes you have a Scorpio North Node. But the key thing with the Taurus South Node person is that you had a past life where you were very materialistic. And this can manifest in many different ways, but maybe you were a very rich husband or housewife, or you were a very rich merchant, or you were something within society that made you very financially abundant. And because of this, you just probably lived a very materialistic past life. And you were only focused on the material aspect of life rather than the spiritual or emotional part of it. And I think one of the unique things with Taurus South Node too is that you're somebody who carries a lot of baggage from their past life. This is somebody where it's like, it's very subtle. Like, it's almost like you carry this baggage from birth. You probably can't even explain it really, but it's more so psychological baggage from your past lives. Because in your past lives, you had very rigid belief systems. You had very rigid values. Like, you had a very unchanging mindset. In your past life, you were somebody who was probably like you could have been a priest or some sort of figure like that, you know, they have this set of morals, this moral code, right? And they don't stray away from that. So you kind of could have been in that archetype, or you could have been literally like a priest or something, or religious figure, or something where you just never strayed from a certain set of beliefs. So therefore you come into this life with a very rigid mindset, with a very, it's just very hard for you to adapt to change. And then, like I said, you're kind of born with a lot of baggage. You might have been born with a feeling of burden as well. Like I said, this can be very psychological, but overall with Taurus South Node, you're very materialistic in your past life. So it's like you have this weird dynamic where you just cling on to things and you don't let go. So you kind of have that from your past life and you carry that into this life. So therefore you carry all of this psychological baggage where it's like you're clinging on to this stuff that's not even yours, right? You're clinging on to something that doesn't even serve you, but that's just generally your habit. And you're somebody who just gets stuck in their habits and their own patterns. And one of your worst habits is clinging on to things. And in your past life, you literally might have clung onto your material possessions, like, with your life. Like, you might have been the type of person in your past life to be buried with all of their possessions, or, I don't know, you died wearing, like, diamonds or something. But anyway, how that impacts your current life is that, like I said, you are very resistant to change. You're somebody who, I know the cliche word with like Taurus South Node is like stubborn, but it's almost like worse than stubborn. Like, you're somebody who is very much prone to stagnation, meaning you're prone to like just the sense of immovability, like the sense of you're so resistant to change that it leads to stagnation. And stagnation is like another word for death. So yeah, you're somebody who doesn't like know how to change. They don't know how to adapt new ways of thinking. You don't know how to change the patterns or change the dynamic of your psychology. So that's something you really struggle with within this lifetime, is changing anything, like changing your mind, changing your way of doing things. You just struggle with change. And because you struggle so much with change, you in turn tend to self-sabotage a lot, because you're so resistant to change, right? That like life is all about change. Like, the epitome of life is literally like changing. Like, that's the only constant in life, right? Is change. So since you can't change, you often sabotage yourself because you're unwilling to recognize different possibilities because you're so stuck in one pattern of thinking. So self-sabotage could be something you struggle with, stubbornness, resistance to change, but ultimately your purpose in life is to become adaptable, learn how to transform, learn how to change, learn how to adopt different viewpoints that aren't your own. You have these very rigid beliefs, right? But it's your destiny to change them up a bit. And then also another habit you might have in this lifetime, I forgot to mention, is that you might be very materialistic in this lifetime as well. You're somebody who very much clings to their material possessions. And then you judge others by materialism too. Like, you're the type of person maybe to judge people by the car they're driving, or what they're wearing, or the designer bag they have. Like, you're very materialistic and you judge others on that scale as well. And it goes back to this mode of thinking you have that is very rigid and materialistic. Okay, so let's talk about the past lives of Gemini South Node. So with Gemini South Node, of course, this means you have a Sagittarius North Node. But essentially, with a Gemini South Node, you had past lives where you were an excellent communicator. And the main ways these can manifest is that maybe in your past life, you were a teacher, you were a writer, you might have been a salesperson. You could have been somebody who was an orator or a speech giver or a preacher. And essentially in your past lives, you took on these Gemini traits of being very excellent at interpersonal communication. You were very charming, very witty. You could have been somebody who, like, if you think about medieval times, you could have been like the court jester. You were the jokester, the trickster, some type of like comedian within the royal court, right? You were somebody who kind of diffused the energy in the room. You're very great at social skills. You're great at the main things you were great at in your past life is that you were somebody who could really understand the perspectives of other people. That's why you were somebody who was like maybe a writer, communicator, salesperson. You could just tap into other people's perspectives really easily, and just understand people very well and have this really immense, like, heightened sense of social intelligence. And overall, you were just somebody very friendly, very sociable. You lived, I mean, I feel like this is a past life that was very, like, I don't know, it's not as, like, dark as some of the other South Nodes. Like, you probably were just some friendly person, or, like I said, like, court jester, or a salesperson, or some type of archetype that aligns with communication. And of course, you could have been a teacher too, which is really common past life for Gemini South Nodes. Okay, so how that impacts your life in the present day is that you're somebody who, like I said, you were very skilled at communicating with other people. You were skilled at banter. You were skilled at superficial conversation, diffusing the room and diffusing the energy in the room, right? And your biggest skill was that you could really adapt to the perspectives of others. But in this life, that's your biggest challenge. Your challenge is that you almost adapt too much to people's perspectives that you lose sight of your own inner truth. And something you struggle with is just being so ingrained in other people's like mentalities, mindsets. You're just so almost like infatuated or ingrained with other people that you don't really have your own sense of truth. You don't have your own sense of intuition. And in this lifetime, you can struggle with just tapping into your intuition. You can struggle with choosing logic over your intuition. You're somebody who over-rationalizes every single thing. In your past life, that really served you well, right? You were somebody great at logic. You were somebody who was a salesperson, right? But at this life, it doesn't really help you because it's like you almost use too much logic where you don't really need it. And you mostly need to tap into your intuition in this lifetime. And then also in this lifetime, you can struggle with this sense of kind of learning too many like frivolous things. Like you just, I don't know, you just learn about so much like superficial knowledge, whereas you really need to learn like philosophy or deeper truths. You really need to go below the surface in this lifetime. I think something you struggle with is just being so superficial and so like surface level with communication and learning things, but you really need to dive deeper, which is like that Sagittarius North Node that you have. And ultimately, I think your biggest challenge is just feeling lost in the sauce. You're just so lost within this field of communication that you build for yourself that you just don't even know your inner truth. You don't even know your own thoughts. You just tap into everyone else's thoughts, which, like I said, helped you in your past life, but in this life, it doesn't really help you. So therefore, your biggest purpose and destiny in life is to rediscover yourself, rediscover your own intuition, rediscover your own truth, literally just like your own inner truth. When it comes to manifesting that specific destiny or purpose for yourself, it can be hard because you have so many influences, right? You have so many like thoughts from other people that you think of and perspectives, and you're like, wait, what about this perspective or that perspective or this, blah, blah, blah. But like, no, you just need to like look within yourself, almost hold a mirror to your own intuition and really rediscover who you truly are. And that is essentially your purpose and destiny in life. Okay, so let's talk about Cancer South Node past lives. With Cancer South Node, of course, you have a Capricorn North Node. And essentially, as a Cancer South Node person in your past lives, you were a householder. And basically what that means is that you were somebody who was like the central person in your home or your community, or even like your family. You might have been the matriarch or the patriarch, or, you know, somebody who was just like the big papa or big mama of their family. And in your past lives, it was very, very focused on family. You were somebody who, maybe you came from a certain lineage, or you were in a royal family, or maybe you were in a certain clan or a tribe. Either way, you were very much in a family unit, whether that be, familial or more cultural. You were in a familial bond with many people. And generally, you were somebody who really identified with that community, with that family. It's almost like, I don't know, if you think about somebody, like let's say you had a past life where you were in a royal family, it's almost like that family name is your identity. It's not like you're like your own person. It's like, okay, here we are the Wentworths or whatever. And you very much identified with that last name or that title. And you didn't really have your own identity within that. You were just a part of a bigger family. Essentially, in your past life, you really didn't have like worldly experience. You weren't like the world traveler. You weren't somebody who ventured out of your comfort zone. You were very much in your comfort zone, in your own family life, in your own home, your own hometown. Your past life wasn't one where you were just exploring outside of that. And the major theme of your past life is this sense of dependence, this sense of codependence. You're somebody who relied on their family for everything. In your past life, you especially relied on your family or clan or whatever tribe for emotional support, probably financial support. You couldn't do anything without them. You couldn't explore anything without them. If you had an emotional distress, you had a dynamic where they would take care of you. It's almost like you had a past life where everything was taken care of for you. It wasn't like you did anything by yourself. You were very much like babied. It's like you had a past life where you're just like a baby. Even if you were an adult or whatever life you lived, you just lived like this baby type of life. So in this lifetime, and how that impacts your current day life, present day life, is that you still struggle with the sense of codependence. You struggle with the sense of dependence. Maybe you're very codependent with your family or a specific family member like your mom or maybe your dad. And you're generally somebody who just won't leave their comfort zone. Like I said, in your past life, that helped you. Like that was your lane to stay in. But in this life, it's not really about that. Because you have a Capricorn North Node, and Capricorn is all about taking charge of your life. So essentially, in this life, you still pretty much act like a baby. You might just be very like victim complex type of person. Like you always see yourself as the victim. You always have this sense of like, something will be taken care of for me. Like somebody will emotionally take care of me, or somebody will, you always have this weird mentality of like, or not weird, I won't say that, but you just have this mentality of like, somebody will take care of it for me. My family will take care of it for me. I'm supported by my family. I have my family to fall back on. Like you always have this sense of like falling back into this comfort zone you're in. That's the hugest struggle of your life. Theme of your life is just staying within this comfort zone. And this comfort zone might literally be your family or your home, or it could be your hometown or something you're a part of, or a club, or something where it's like, it's not just you. It's like a club or something, or family. And you have the habit of staying within that. Lastly, one of the struggles you have is that you're very emotionally manipulative, or you could be, because like I said, you kind of act like a baby in this lifetime. So the way babies get their way is that they throw an outburst, right? Like you have these emotional outbursts, and you expect people to just change because of that. You know what I mean? It's like a baby cries and expects to get their way after. And that's kind of how you operate now in this lifetime. It's like, I'm going to have this outburst. I'm going to do this emotional, drama. And I expect people to act accordingly. And that's kind of like how you operate. And that's very, very toxic. And maybe that helped you in your last lifetime, but this lifetime, it's not going to work. So therefore, it is your purpose and destiny in life to take charge of your life, take responsibility of your life. You have to evolve into this Capricorn North Node. I do have a video on Capricorn North Node if you want to watch it. I'll link probably down below. But it is your responsibility to take charge of your life, to really, stop being the victim, stop being the baby, like start being the dad, like archetype, or start being like the boss archetype or authority, because you do have control of your life. And when you realize that, that's when you're in alignment with your purpose and destiny. But as long as you're acting like a baby and a victim, you're not. So yeah, essentially your purpose in life is to take charge of your life and stop being a victim. Okay, so let's talk about Leo South Node past lives. So with Leo South Node, you automatically have a Aquarius North Node. But with Leo South Node, you had past lives where you were somebody of importance. And essentially this manifests as maybe you were a king or a queen, potentially even just somebody important in society, like a famous person, like an actress, entertainer. You could have even been somebody who was a dictator or chief. Either way, you were in a position of being very known in the public eye. And in your past life, like I said, you were somebody who's very important. You were like a VIP, a very important person. You're somebody who was used to getting their way. You were used to being admired by an audience. And generally, you were somebody who was very, very privileged. You always had the best of life. You always had the luxuries of life. You always had people attending to you, doting on you. You might have had servants. Like I said, you're used to having this sense of an audience around you. And even if it wasn't like a literal audience, you just had people like rolling out the red carpet for you. You were just treated in a very privileged, very special kind of way because you were just so important and very much known in the public eye. And you were somebody who very much had the spotlight on you. Like I said, you were very respected, very admired, and just very recognized by many people. And you were used to the feeling of applause. You were used to the feeling of attention, just this feeling of being admired by many. So how that impacts your present life is that you definitely struggle with special snowflake syndrome. Like I said, in your past life, you're somebody who was special, who was very important for some reason. And in this life, you're very entitled to that same position or that same energy. It's almost like you feel like you should be recognized as special everywhere you go. You're very entitled in that sense. And although you did have the privilege of being very special in your past life, it doesn't really translate into this life. And it does rub people the wrong way when you act like that. And something that comes from this whole special snowflake syndrome is that you're somebody who can have a very inflated ego. You can be very naive. And then in general, you just act very spoiled and very entitled. And it's almost like you're entitled to other people's attention. Like I said, you're used to this feeling of applause, this feeling of admiration. So you feel like, okay, I need that in this life. It's like you subconsciously act that way. This is something where it's like, you don't consciously think like this. It's not like you're thinking like, oh, I'm special, like pay attention to me. Like you subconsciously just act that way because in your past life, you were just so used to being that. So in this life, you feel like you should still be that person, even though you're not. And so generally what you struggle with in this life is that you channel so much energy into yourself. It's not like you're selfish. I would just say you're self-centered, like almost extremely so. It's almost like that extreme archetype of Leo. Leo is a very self-centered type of sign, right? So when you have it in the South Node, it's almost like that self-centered energy is magnified. Like I said, you feel like everything should be about you, attention all on you, roll the red carpets out for me, look at me, applaud me, because it's just who I am, right? But that energy is just so useless in this life, and it's something you have to evolve away from. And because you have this such a self-centered way of being, you tend to bulldoze over people. You tend to not have awareness of others. It's almost like you're so self-centered that you just don't even recognize when you're just walking all over people or not treating them well or just not considering other people because you're just so focused on you. But basically your purpose in life is to use all this energy you have, because you do have a lot of energy that you put on yourself, but your purpose and destiny is to take that energy from off of yourself and put it into other people, put it into a cause, put it into a humanitarian project, put it into humanity, your community. Your life is all about empowering others, empowering the community. And this really ties into your Aquarius North Node, which I have a video on if you guys want to watch that. But Aquarius North Node, it's all about, being involved in a cause that helps other people, helps humanity. Take the attention away from yourself. You already had that attention in your past life. You already were famous. You already did that. You don't need to be that again. What you do need to do is, let's say, like, this can manifest many ways, but let's say you're interested in like political causes. Maybe you're interested in justice or law, or maybe you're interested in like, I don't know, like global warming initiatives to like save the earth, like something like that. Something very Aquarius would really help you, pull you out of that South Node Leo and into this Aquarius North Node, which you need to be in. And essentially, bottom line, your purpose and destiny in life is to be less self-focused and more humanity-focused. Okay, so let's talk about Virgo South Node past lives. Virgo South Node, of course, that means you are a Pisces North Node. But with Virgo South Node people, you had a past life or past lives where you were a healer. And generally, you were somebody who was a helper, somebody who served others. You were somebody who could have been a physically help people or physically heal people. And specifically in your past life, you could have been a doctor, you could have been a surgeon, nurse. You also could have been a monk or shaman or potentially even a role model. Something where it's like you are serving others, but it's like you're the role model for that. So I think a nun is a good example of that. A monk, shaman, somebody who what's the word I'm thinking of? Like a medicine man. Like that's a perfect example of a Virgo South Node, where it's like you're healing people, you're helping people. A doctor, you're physically helping people. But you have like this almost responsibility. You have this kind of respected, almost public image. I think doctors have respected public images, you know. And then like medicine men and nuns, they have this very holy, very pure self-image. And that was really your past life. And really your past life was just mostly about other people. This isn't a very selfish South Node sign. In your past life, you were helping people, whether it be physically, spiritually, a spiritual healer, a physical healer, you were always helping people. And you were very, and because the nature of your past life was about saving people's lives, it caused you to be very, very perfectionist, very meticulous, it caused you to be very plan oriented, because I mean, if you're dealing with someone's life and you're trying to, you know, if you're a doctor trying to do a procedure, if you mess that up, somebody will lose their life because of you. It prompted you to be very cautious and perfectionist of how you heal others and your actions toward others, because a lot of the times people's lives were literally in your hands. So it caused you to be very responsible and very conscious of that. Because in the medical field, there isn't really room for mistakes. There isn't room for, you know, trial and error or carelessness. So you were somebody who was very careful, somebody very service oriented and very helpful towards others, because you didn't want to lose people's lives at their expense. So in this lifetime, it is your purpose and destiny to release the obsession over perfectionism. And ultimately, it's like your purpose and destiny in life to be at peace. If we think about it, your North Node is in Pisces. Pisces isn't about structure. It's not obsessed with being a role model or responsible or like perfectionist. It's all about kind of going with the flow and just being at peace with your spirit. And I think cultivating a sense of inner peace is like your biggest challenge in life and your biggest destiny. And just not feeling so high strung about expectations and burdening yourself with like responsibilities that aren't really necessary. And I think this is a really unique like North and South Node, just because in your last life, you served so many people. You helped a lot of people. You were a nurse, a shaman, whatever, monk, nun, that in this lifetime, you don't really need to do that. I mean, if you want to do that, that's great. But like, it's like, you don't need to be so service oriented, because you already did that. So you kind of have good karma because of your past life, so you can kind of just chill. Literally, your destiny in life is to like relax. Your destiny is to be at peace, to be at harmony, just to chill out. You don't need to be obsessed or perfectionist or anything like that, because you already did that in your last life, and it did help you, and it helped so many other people. And because you helped so many other people, you can chill in this life because you were very generous with your helpfulness. Okay, so let's talk about Libra South Node past lives. Libra South Node, this automatically makes you have a Aries North Node. So Libra South Node in your past lives, you were somebody who was very much a support system for other people. And how this manifests is that maybe in your past life, you could have been a secretary, maybe an assistant, potentially even like a housewife, husband, like a stay-at-home mom, housewife type of person. You could have even been a counselor. You could have just been any archetype where it was like you're helping other people. You weren't necessarily like the center stage person. You weren't the boss. You were the supporting role. And really, it's like you were almost like behind the scenes. It's not like you were the actor, but you were like the PA, like the personal assistant on set, or like you were like the cameraman, or something like that, where you weren't really like the main center stage. You were just helping the person that was center stage. And so really in your past life, you were very focused, like you focused all of your energy on supporting other people. And really in your past life, you kind of had this heightened awareness of others. This wasn't a self-centered past life for you at all. It was all about other people. You might have had a very significant marriage, significant friendship. You might have had many significant friendships or marriages. Either way, you were just somebody who was very aware of others and very generous with your sense of love. You were very reassuring to other people. You were very encouraging. You were just this very like encouraging, reassuring type of person, like a very nice, warm spirit. And you were just so generous and really just devoted all your attention to others. And like I said, it wasn't really focused on yourself. You're more so focused on the people around you. So how this impacts your present life is that you overly support people to the point where you erase your own identity. And I think it's one of the most challenging things with this South Node is like, in your past life, it did benefit you to help others. It did benefit you to just channel all your energies into partnerships and, you know, be encouraging and generous and blah, blah, blah. And generally that's like great traits to have. But in this lifetime, it's almost like you do that way too much. And it's almost like you kind of like self-sacrifice a bit. Like you're like the ultimate people pleaser, maybe. Like you're somebody who just devotes so much energy into other people that it's like you almost don't receive any benefit of it. You often find yourself in the dynamic where it's like you rely on people or expect people to give you the same energy you give them, but you're just very much disappointed by people. I definitely think this is the South Node where it's like you're disappointed by people quite often. And you're disappointed by them because you just expect like this reciprocation that is just not realistic, or you accept reciprocation that it's just not likely. I think in your past life, you had a lot of successful partnerships where reciprocation was just abundant. It was flowing for you. You had partnerships that were successful in your past life, and then you come into this life and you have that expectation of like this sense of reciprocation, or the sense that people will give the same energy back to you after you devoted all this energy to them. But honestly, it doesn't really happen for you that way. Like, people just disappoint you. Obviously, you do have successful partnerships and friendships. Like, it's not like every single person is, like, kind of doing that to you. But you do run into that conflict and issue of people just kind of disappointing you because you expect so much out of them. And overall, you're just somebody who is very accommodating. That's one of your challenges in life. Again, this is a challenging South Node to have, just because, like, those are great traits to have in society, right? Like, to be accommodating and care about others and blah, blah, blah. But for you, like, you're more so destined to be more so self-centered in this lifetime, which I know is sort of like, okay, what? But honestly, in your past life, serving others helped you, but in this life, more so, it helps others when you serve yourself first. And then, like I said, because you're so accommodating, because you're so like people pleaser, I guess, ish, you're somebody who definitely loses their identity, or you just have this lack of identity. Like, it's not like, it's sort of like you don't know who you are, or you just don't have this independence about you. There's some people where it's like, I am who I am, this is who I am, I can talk about myself and tell you who I am. But with you, you might struggle with that a bit, because your perception of yourself comes from your perception of people around you. And really, in your last lifetime, that's how the dynamic was. You're used to that, right? So in this lifetime, you carry that with you, but it's not going to help you in this lifetime. So you need to develop a very firm sense of self and a very independent sense of self to succeed in this life. And really, your purpose and destiny in life is to get in touch with your own vibration. Get in touch with the power of your own vibration, like literally just your own vibration. Don't let anyone cloud your little bubble. Like, literally get in touch with your truest self, your own inner independence, and that is your destiny. And ultimately, I would chalk up your destiny to the word independence. That's really the major theme of your life and something you're going to cultivate in your lifetime. Okay, so let's talk about Scorpio South Node past lives. So Scorpio South Node, of course, this means you have a Taurus North Node. So with Taurus South Node, you had past lives where you were bonded with people in positions of power. So basically what this means is that in your past lives, you could have been you could have been like the president's right-hand man, or the chief of staff, or or you could have been a counselor to a very powerful person. Like, if you think about the president, you think about the like top person in their cabinet, that was you. You were somebody who was very important to somebody important, if that makes sense. And you also could have been somebody like the confidant to like a army general or something like that. Like, think of just anybody really important in society, like a king or queen or chief or general. You were their right-hand man. And basically, this South Node is really funny because when I was researching this, it made it sound like you guys were basically like sugar babies. Like it's almost like you sort of lived off the power of people you were associated with. Like I said, you were bonded with them. You served a purpose to them, and in turn, in exchange, they kind of financially supported you. So like I said, if you were like the right-hand man to the king or queen, they gave you a very luxurious life. They gave you a life that they probably lived as well. Because you were like in the king or queen's royal court, you never had to worry about money. You never had to work necessarily in the traditional sense for what you had. You were just given it because you were associated with powerful people, so they just gave you what they had, so therefore you had luxury, and therefore you were sort of like a sugar baby. And so essentially with this like whole sugar baby theme, you were just somebody who was dependent on somebody else's wealth. If you weren't literally bonded to somebody in power, you were just somebody who literally just like lived off somebody else in their past lifetime. And so you're just somebody too who just like merged with other people, if that makes sense. Like you were somebody who energetically were very bonded with other people. Like you could be somebody who had a very specific soulmate in your past life. If you ever do like past life regressions, you might like, I don't know, see someone that you were like very closely bonded to. You're somebody who wasn't very much into solitude. It's not like an Aries South Node. You were somebody who was very much bonded with somebody. And maybe you were bonded with someone that was very specific. And then also in your past life, you could have been somebody who was like a psychologist or a strategist. Like I said, this all has to do with being bonded to someone in power. So I can imagine you being like, I don't know, like, you know how like when they were in war back in the day, there was like the strategist or like the chief in command. And since you were in such a high position to someone in power, you always just benefited from people in power for some reason. And it's because you had those special abilities. You could have been somebody who was psychic as well, somebody who was very tapped into psychology. And also in your past life, you could have been somebody who experienced a lot of chaos and instability. Like nothing about your life was very stable. It was always very chaotic. But that kind of helped you in your past life because you knew how to make order out of chaos. That's why you were such a good psychologist. You were a good strategist because in times of panic and chaos, you could really like, I don't know, be very focused and very strategic. And also you could have been somebody who was in power yourself, so maybe you abused your power, maybe you experienced violence in your past life. Either way, there might have been an abuse of power or some abuse of violence in your past life. So how that impacts your present day life is that, like I said, you can still have this notion of living off somebody else. Like you can be somebody who always, you know, maybe you just naturally get stuff from people, or you just live off people, or you're like a sugar baby, but in your past life, that kind of helped you. Like that was fine in your past life, but in this life, it doesn't really help you. So one of the goals in your life is to really develop a sense of financial independence. And I think one of the things you struggle with in this life is that, like, since everything was taken care of in your last life, you didn't have to worry about money. You didn't have to worry about anything because, you know, you just benefited from other people. That in this life, you might have poor money management skills, or you just don't care about money, or you just don't take money as seriously as you should. Like, you kind of think like, oh yeah, it's taken care of. Like, somebody will take care of it. Like, you just kind of have this mentality that somebody will take care of it for you. But it doesn't really help you necessarily in this lifetime to still think like that. And then also, I will say, in this lifetime, you might struggle with extremes. Like, you're somebody who will experience the extremes of life. Like, you will be like in a corporate career and then be homeless, or you might be like corporate and then like spiritual, or like you just experience like all these extremes. Like you might be like an artist and then you're like a, I don't know, engineer. Like you just experience a lot of extremes of life. Maybe you're extremely rich one day and then extremely broke the next. You just experience a lot of extremes. And that's because in your past life, extremes was something you dealt well with. Like you were good at handling extremes. Like I said, you were great at handling chaos in your last life. But in this life, you kind of, I don't know, you might experience chaos, but it doesn't really help you in any way. Obviously, chaos is chaos, but in your last life, uniquely to you, it helped you, but in this life, it doesn't really help you. So in that sense, you might experience the extremes of life, and that can manifest in many ways, and sometimes it's very challenging for Scorpio South Node people. But that takes us to your purpose and destiny in this life. It's more so Taurus-oriented. So what is Taurus? Taurus is all about money. In this lifetime, not to say that your life is about money, but it's more so about establishing financial independence. And more so just like taking that responsibility for yourself. Like I said, you don't care about money. You're like, okay, somebody's got that for me. Like somebody will pay my tab type of thing. But in this life, you really need to develop that financial stability for yourself. Be in tune with your finances. Really develop a foundation for yourself to stand on, and not just rely on, like, don't rely on streams of income that aren't really consistent for you, or rely on somebody else's wealth, because it's not really going to serve you in this lifetime to do that. But it is your purpose and destiny to develop financial stability for yourself. Okay, so let's talk about Sagittarius South Node. So with Sag South Node, that automatically puts you at a Gemini North Node. But with a Sag South Node, in your past lives, you were somebody who was a truth seeker. And basically in your past life, you could have been a nomad. Maybe you were a wanderer. You were somebody who like just put on a backpack one day and was like, I'm just gonna go into the forest and never really come out. But you just always had this intense search for the truth. You always had this very intentional search for truth, and because you had this kind of spiritual search or spiritual journey for truth, you were kind of disconnected from society. Like I said, you could have been somebody who was like you just went into the desert, or like, let's say you had like a bus or something and you go into the desert, just like, I don't know, on an adventure, or just traveling very aimlessly or randomly. You could have also been somebody that was always on like a spiritual pilgrimage. Like I said, there's just like this theme of spiritual journey with your past life. You could have been a hermit too, like somebody who just lived on like the outskirts of society. But you always had this intention of finding out the truth. Because of that, you might have traveled to unknown lands. You might have, traveled just in general a lot. You might have been somebody who just lived in nature by themselves. Either way, you weren't really connected to the structure or hierarchies of society. You were very on the outskirts of it, or just really on your own path, your own spiritual journey. And this journey for you was all about finding some type of truth. And given this, you could have been like a philosopher, maybe even like a preacher type of person. You might have been somebody who was like involved in like a religious organization too. So like I mentioned, like you could have been a nomad by yourself, but you could have also been like in a group. Like you guys could have been all on like a bus going somewhere, just searching the truth. Just like this very nomadic like experience. It wasn't very grounded in anything. It was just very much like, let's just go, let's just explore, let's just find the truth. No matter the cost, we're just going to find the truth. We're not connected to society. It's just like this traveling type of energy. So yeah, overall, like I said, in your past life, you were so absorbed with spirituality, you were so absorbed with like this spiritual journey type of thing, that you weren't connected to really society, or you weren't connected to anyone really. So how that impacts your life in this present day is that you still might have those tendencies. You might just leave people in search of the truth. You could be somebody who could just be like, I'm going on a backpacking trip in, I don't know, Peru or something, and for like a month, and just not tell anyone, or maybe you do tell people, but either way, it's just like you go on these one-off like adventures. Maybe you go with people. Maybe you're just very into traveling to different countries in search of some sort of truth. But in this lifetime, it gets sort of diluted because it's like in your past life, you found the truth. In your past life, you went on the journey and you found the truth. But in this lifetime, you don't need to do that. It's like you already found the truth, so you don't need to keep searching. So you might have this habit of always trying to search for something, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of endless for you. It's kind of frivolous to do that, because it's like you already found it. You don't need to keep doing that in this lifetime. In this present life, it's not going to serve you to always be on some truth-seeking journey. And also in this lifetime, you can struggle with communication issues. Like I said, in your past life, you could have been someone on the outskirts of society, somebody who was not connected with society at all. You weren't with the, traditional hierarchies, right? So in this life, you kind of struggle with that. There's still like remnants of that same archetype. Like maybe you're somebody who just has trouble communicating. You're somebody who has so much knowledge and wisdom about them that you always think you're right. So because you're so like self-righteous about yourself, you always think you're right, whatever. You just have trouble communicating with people. People are like, why are they like, why are they so preachy? Why are you so self-righteous? Like, in this lifetime, you're learning how to communicate with people. And that requires you to kind of like get off your high horse and just kind of face to face, just speak with people, and not just be, prejudiced or self-righteous about your beliefs or your philosophies. So that brings me to your purpose and destiny in life. So your purpose and destiny in life is to really share this truth with others. Like I said, you already have your truth. You already have your inner truth, but you have a Gemini North Node, which is about communication. So your life is more so about like kind of joining with others. One, like you don't have to be this Lone Ranger person, but you also have to share the truth you learned with others. Share your inner truth, your inner wisdom with others, but you don't have to do it in such a preachy, self-righteous way. You can do it in a very like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a very like, communicative, very understandable, very amicable way with other people. And also your purpose and destiny in life could be to rejoin society. Like I said, you might carry this same energy of just feeling like you have to go on these one-off journeys by yourself and do all this stuff that deviates from the norm or deviates from the structures of society. But in this lifetime, you do have to kind of rejoin society, reintegrate yourself into these kind of social societal norms in order to fulfill your destiny. Okay, so let's talk about Capricorn South Node past lives. So Capricorn South Node, you automatically have a Cancer North Node. And essentially, with Capricorn South Node past lives, in your past life, you lived a very structured life. So the way this can manifest is that you were somebody involved in religious environments. Maybe you were like a religious authority, like a priest, you were in a monastery, you might have been just involved in like these communities with structure, with a hierarchy. And typically it does carry like a religious theme. If it wasn't religious, you might have been like a politician. You could have been maybe like a religious official, maybe a pastor. Either way, in your past life, you were a public authority. You were somebody who had respect from the public, somebody who was very serious. It's not like you were famous, it's more so just like a public authority. Like I said, a priest, somebody who was kind of revered by other people and respected and taken very seriously in the structure or hierarchy they were in. And in your past life, you had a dynamic where you were separated from like family dynamics. You weren't necessarily like, in a family. Like obviously maybe you had a family in your past life, but it wasn't like you were used to typical family dynamics. You were more so used to some sort of hierarchy, some sort of like structured, very disciplined type of environment. And overall, you lived a very disciplined life. And in your past life, you were somebody who lived a very restrictive life too. You're somebody who repressed their urges, repressed their desires. This wasn't like a fun party life. This was a very like, I'm doing this one thing, very structured, very focused, very Capricorn, very Saturn energy. And really in your past life, you didn't really have pleasure. You didn't really have enjoyment. Like I said, you're maybe like a priest or something. And I think it's like a thing for priests to like abstain from like pleasure or something like that. Like that was like your past life. You were definitely somebody who did not have pleasures. You restricted yourself from them. Either it was like self-imposed or it was required of the structure you were a part of. So how that impacts your daily life is that you still carry the same habit. You might restrict yourself from pleasures. You might restrict yourself from fun and enjoyment. You might still try to live like this very disciplined life because you're carrying this subconscious energy from your past life of just not having fun, not enjoying things. And then also Capricorn South Node, in your present life, you can struggle with connecting with people. Like I said, you lived a very structured life. You were probably a part of like some structured church or organization where it's like, there's a hierarchy, right? You had a title, right? So you never really strayed outside of that structure. So in this lifetime, when it comes to connecting with people, obviously connecting with people isn't like structured. You could just meet someone and be like, oh, this is my friend, this is my girlfriend, I'm dating them. Like you don't just have those casual connections with people, or at least it's hard for you to make those casual connections because you're so used to this past life of being structured, being this authority, being this person with a title that you don't even know how to be a casual, just like interpersonal type of person. And so when it comes to these social dynamics, you really struggle with them. You can be quite awkward. You can just be someone with very awkward tendencies and just have this wall up, right? You just have this very strict, very stern, rigid demeanor where you just have trouble having this like emotional connection with people. And then also you could be someone who doesn't really make time for fun. And then also I will say you're somebody with very lofty goals. Like you're somebody who's always trying to pursue some lofty goal, but it doesn't really help you in this lifetime. It's like you're chasing nothing. Like you're chasing sand, or you're trying to like run on sand or something. And it's almost like these goals that you have are very insatiable. There's something that can't really be satisfied because it's something you carried from your past life. In your past life, you had goals, you reached them. It was all very structured and very disciplined, right? But in this lifetime, you don't really need that. Like you don't need to be doing all that. It's like good to have goals, but to just chase these goals so hard that you just neglect your personal relationships, it doesn't really help you. And also when you chase these goals, it makes you kind of like not have fun or not have enjoyment. And in this life, you can have enjoyment. Like that's really one of your life goals, I think, is to have enjoyment, have pleasure. Don't restrict yourself so much. And then also you're somebody who's very much driven by the need for respect. Like you always want people to respect you. Like since you were an authority in your past life, you expect that same respect that you had in your past life. But the thing is, it doesn't really translate the same in this lifetime. In this lifetime, you more so have to give respect first to get it. I think you just expect it off the bat and you're very driven by having respect from people. And but you don't really get it unless you give it. So that's more of the dynamic you're dealing with in this present life. So in this life, you really need to work on expression of your feelings. You tend to suppress them a lot. Like I said, you restrict yourself a lot, but you really need to express your feelings. You need to develop familial bonds with people, have casual connections with people, work on your social skills. And really it's your purpose and destiny in life to really soften your heart. Oh my God, you don't have to be so closed off, so cold, so rigid. Soften your heart, develop emotional bonds with people. Also, it's part of your destiny to really give respect to people. And then you'll watch and see, like, you'll get respect from people just by giving it to them. Don't expect respect right away. I know we all expect respect and we should get it, but with you specifically, you need to give it first. Like, that's emphasized in your life's destiny. Okay, so let's talk about Aquarius South Node past lives. So with Aquarius South Node, that automatically makes you have a Leo North Node. But with Aquarius South Node, in your past life, you were somebody who was an observer. And specifically, in your past life, you could have been a scientist. You could have been some sort of observant person. I don't know what like life path that would be, but you could have been a scientist, an alchemist, a humanitarian. You were somebody who observed society from like the outside perspective. You were just a very observant archetype type of person. And in your past life, you weren't really in touch with like your inner child. You didn't really lead like this super fun, crazy life. In your past life, you might have been somebody who was very serious, very rigid, very stern, because like I said, you were the scientist probably. You were always looking at things in a very observant, objective way, that you were never really in, I don't know, you were never really in the funner aspects of life. You were just in a very observant aspect of life. And in general, you just led a very detached life. You might have been very detached from society. Obviously, you were a part of society and probably involved in like humanitarian organizations, but you were never really like in interpersonal relations, if that makes sense. So in that sense, you led a very detached life. You were very much like this scientific archetype, just like this scientist type of person. So in this lifetime, how that impacts you is you kind of carry that same habit. You're somebody who is very almost observant and scientific, which is great, but in your past life, that helped you because that was your profession. That was like who you were. You were the scientist probably. But in this lifetime, you don't really need to like being overly observant or objective doesn't really help you that much. Because with you, you might take it to the extreme where it's like you're so observant that you repress your inner child. You repress the sense of fun. In your past life, you didn't have a lot of fun. It wasn't like a stereotypical just like fun life. It wasn't like the Leo North Node, right? So in order to reach that Leo North Node, you need to have fun. You need to get in touch with your inner child. You need to like do things that are like childish, that kind of bring you to this North Node energy. And Aquarius South Node is unique because, like I said, you can do like childish things. You can like hang out with your little cousins and like draw or like, I don't know, play games or imaginary games, I guess. And that will help you just fulfill your destiny almost. Even though it seems mundane and kind of childish, like getting in touch with that inner child and not being so rigid and cold will really help you fulfill your destiny in life. And then also what you might struggle with in this life is that, like I said, you have this almost extreme archetype of observation that it almost becomes like superiority. It becomes like, oh my gosh, I can see everything like from this, you know, elevated perspective, that like you're just kind of judgmental of people. You can be somewhat judgmental, somewhat like I said, superiority complex type of person. And really being the observer is your comfort zone. It's something you need to step out of. In your past life, that was great. You were the observer, the scientist, it helped you, but in this life, it's not going to help you. Also with Aquarius South Node, you could have been born into dysfunction or been born into a family where somebody in your family was dysfunctional or there was a dysfunctional dynamic. And that was something that really prompts your observation, right? Because almost when you were a kid, you developed this sense of observing other people's dysfunction that you repressed your inner child. Because if you're busy observing people's dysfunction, you don't have time to like tend to your inner child. So in this life, it's more about tending to that inner child. That's your purpose and destiny. And even if you were born into dysfunction where you had to almost were forced into the observer position, you need to learn how to get back in touch with your inner child. And ultimately, it's your destiny and purpose in life to just have fun, play, be less scientific, be less observant, be less rigid, express your creativity, express yourself. I always tell like Leo North Node, it's almost like you have a creativity to share with the world. A lot of Leo North Nodes end up being famous in life. I mean, that's not everyone, but a lot of times it could be like you're destined for fame or destined to share something with the world. But ultimately, it comes from your inner child. It's not like you're going to be famous for being a scientist. You're not supposed to be a scientist in this life. You were already a scientist in your past life. In this life, you need to be something creative and, you know, flamboyant and exciting and fun is really your destiny and purpose in this lifetime. Okay, let's talk about Pisces South Node past lives. So with Pisces South Node, this automatically gives you a Virgo North Node. So with Pisces South Node, right away, you had past lives that were very spiritual. You were definitely somebody involved in a spiritual role. You could have been like a spiritual shaman, some sort of like medicine man, or maybe even like a hermit. And Pisces South Node can manifest in a lot of different ways, but you could have been somebody that was always on a spiritual journey. Your life didn't really have structure. Your life wasn't really practical. You were somebody who lived like in different levels of consciousness, or you kind of, you know, traveled between dimensions. You were never really in this archetypical traditional reality we think of. Another way this can manifest is that you could have been somebody who lived in isolation. You could have been somebody who was in an asylum, or like you were imprisoned, or you were in a hospital. There was maybe some type of confinement, because with your past life, you could have been, you know, like I said, isolated in a hospital, asylum. You could have also been somebody who suffered from drug abuse or substance abuse, or any type of drug or something. You could have been a drug addict. I know this sounds really dark, but this is just some stuff associated with like Pisces South Node. And then maybe on a brighter note, you could have been a musician, maybe even a poet or something very artistic. But with Pisces energy, there comes a sense of unstructuredness. So anything in society involving unstructuredness, maybe you were a part of. And then on the more darker side, you could have been somebody who was in prison or a criminal or in confinement or isolation or something. But overall, the main takeaways from your past life is that your life did lack structure. It wasn't practical. It wasn't structured at all. It wasn't traditional. And then also you might have had addictive tendencies. That's where the drug abuse comes from. That's where like the criminal maybe past life comes from, is that maybe you had addictive tendencies. And then also on the more so spiritual side, you could have had a very expanded level of consciousness. You could have been somebody who merged between dimensions. You weren't really in one dimension. You could have just lived this very complex spiritual past life. So in this lifetime, how that impacts you is that you could be somebody who gives up way too easily. You're somebody who can be kind of weak-willed. Like it's like, I don't know, you struggle with making plans and actually following through with them. Because like I said, your North Node is in Virgo. Virgo is all about plans, organization, which is what you have to learn in this life. But in your past life, you didn't know about that. So in this life, you have this tendency to be escapist. Like you could be somebody who is prone to escapism. Like you just try to run away from your problems. You try to drink your problems away, do drugs or something, or isolate, or sleep too much, or dream too much, or you just have these addictive tendencies that you do to escape from your actual practical reality. And that's because in your past life, that was fine. Like that's the life you lived. Like you lived a very unstructured life, and there wasn't anything wrong with that in your past life, right? But in this life, it doesn't really help you. You need to be very like grounded in reality. You need practical plans. You need to follow through on those plans. You need to like not give up on yourself. And in this life, you can just really struggle with lack of structure in your life. Like I said, it's hard for you to be grounded and hard for you to be practical. It's hard for you to be grounded in reality. Another thing I noticed with Pisces South Node is that you can have this very diluted relationship with money. It's almost like you don't care about money, or you feel like you don't deserve it. Or I think the most common example is like, you could be somebody who offers a service, right? But then you don't get paid for that service. Like you feel like you shouldn't get paid for being a tarot reader or something like that. You're like, oh wait, I don't need to be paid for this. But in this lifetime, you need to learn how to charge for your services. You need to learn that like you need money to survive, so therefore you need to charge people, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it is part of your purpose and destiny to realize your worth and charge people accordingly, and not be afraid to accept money for what you do, because at the end of the day, you are giving your energy to someone, so therefore they need to pay you for that. And ultimately, your purpose and destiny in life is to manifest your vision in the physical world. And I think it's one of the hardest things with this like South Node, North Node dynamic. Is just like you're so rooted in this spiritual, unstructured reality that you have no idea to like maybe manifest it. But really it's your destiny to learn how to manifest the dream world that you have into reality, to make concrete plans and follow them through and complete them, and set goals for yourself and complete them. That's your key thing in life, because I think you probably know how to make plans and do all that, but you maybe struggle with actualizing them. You struggle with turning them into reality and accomplishing them. And I will say your biggest purpose and destiny in life is this sense of accomplishment and structuring your goals and completing them. And like I said, ultimately manifesting your dream life into a concrete reality.